Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Literature Festival 2026. We are celebrating the seventh edition of this literature festival, and today's title is Censorship and Code: Navigating Freedom in the Digital Era. And this session examines online and offline censorship, ethical journalism, and the role of digital platforms in shaping storytelling and public discourse. And now I would love to welcome my very honored guests, Meena Kandasamy and Zain Saeed. So, welcome. Now I'd like to do a little bit of introduction. Uh, Meena Kandasamy is described by The Independent as one woman agitprop literary political movement. Meena is a poet, writer, translator, anti-caste activist, and academic based in India. Over 20 years, her writing has addressed state and structural violence and people's militant resistance against caste, gender, and ethnic oppressions. Her extensive corpus includes 3 poetry collections, including Touch in 2006, Miss Militancy in 2010, and Tomorrow Someone Will Arrest You, 2023, as well as 3 novels, The Gypsy Goddess in 2014, the Women's Prize shortlisted When I Hit You in 2017, and Exquisite Cadavers in 2019. In 2022, she was elected Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and was also awarded the Herman Keston Prize for her writing and work as a fearless fighter for democracy, human rights, and the free word. She holds a PhD in sociolinguistics, and her work has been translated in more than 20 languages. A warm welcome, Meena.
Thank you, Sabine.
Zain Saeed is the author of Little America, winner of the Karachi Literature Festival English Fiction Prize 2022, and the Year of Sound and Heat, also nominated for the same award. He earned his MFA from the University of Texas at Austin. He lives in Ifrane, or Ifran, as Zain told me, Morocco, where he teaches creative writing and the performing arts at Al Quwain University. Welcome, Zain.
Thank you very much, Sabine.
So, in this discussion, we will focus on how we protect the radical imagination when both the physical state and digital infrastructure are working to homogenize our stories. We will focus on what is the price of speaking the truth and also talk about this new censorship, moving forward from just book banning to algorithmic shadow banning and so on and so forth. Zain, I will like to now give the baton to you to start this discussion with Meena.
Yeah, hi. So I think a good place to start would be to start with the things we have in common, which is I think Meena, I've read When I Hit You and was really fascinated by it and was really involved in it while I was reading it. So I think it's a good place to start because the Little America, which Sabine also spoke about, and your book, in both of those books, the protagonist kind of tries to strive towards freedom of some sort. For your protagonist, obviously, it's freedom in within a marriage, and for mine, it was more of kind of freedom against societal, uh, what's the word, restrictions in a larger way. So, what does it say about our characters that they are striving for freedom, but that striving kind of puts them back in a cage? It's like this idea of trying to strive for something better, but they end up in a cage where they don't really, yeah, which they can't get out of. Let's start there. Why not talk about how freedom, how the search for freedom, how the struggle for freedom leads both of these characters to kind of, it makes their situations even worse in a way.
Um, yeah, thanks. Thank you, Zain. Thanks for that question. I think this is an interesting place to begin. And I think it's true that at the heart of it, when people start looking for freedom or looking for at least, let's say, some broader concept of individual liberty, they are going to, especially in repressive societies or within traditional forms like like a marriage or an institutionalized form like the marriage, they're going to have to come up with a lot against it. But I think primarily what is concerning for the protagonist in When I Hit You is this idea of the sense of the self, that she finds that it's being erased and that she cannot get a supervised freedom, that she wants to be herself and she has to be all of that. And even even within that, it's also the question of a very specific kind of digital surveillance that she faces. She marries somebody who is saying all the right things. He's a communist, he's a socialist, he's progressive and all of that. But at the same time, you have to, your passwords are scrutinized, your chats are scrutinized, your call logs are scrutinized. And I think on the one hand, the promise or the allure of the internet was that, we could be more of ourselves on it. But the backlash of the internet is that, or anything that's digital, has been that you're really monitored in ways in which other types of surveillance would involve actually hiring a spy or something. So it becomes like a pocket method of monitoring you. So no, I completely understand that. And the fact that we yearn for freedom, and how very specifically difficult many of these digital things make, because she also thinks about her digital footprints, like what if I lost the idea of everything that was my identity so far, and what if you have to start from a blank page? And I think uh, on the one hand, it looks liberating, but also it's completely an erasure of memory and all of that. So, I keep thinking about this question a lot. And sometimes I think that, you may not have access to your own memories, but the state can have, and, big corporations can still hold on to things about you.
Yeah, I think it's, if you think about it that way, domestic and political censorship are just the same kind of censorship, but in different rooms, right? One's in a smaller microcosm, and the other is more general. So I think this idea that we're striving for freedom, we're striving for freedom of expression, but we're up against these forces that won't let us get to where we're getting to. And I think what you said about the digital footprint, or being kind of restricted even within the confines of your own home when trying to express yourself, is particularly relevant for writers, or even content creators for that matter, because I teach younger students, and I teach young students. They're all university students, and they live out most of their lives on the internet. More than, I think, 80% of their lives are spent online. That is where they express themselves. That is where they strive for whatever freedom they're after. That's where they strive for. That's where they express themselves creatively. So I think this idea that, just even because I think when we talk about censorship in a general way, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, someone banned a film, like a film release, or someone banned a gathering, But I think these little things where, as Sabine mentioned at the start, with shadow banning or just some algorithm not letting you see what someone said about a particularly sensitive topic. I think these are really important things to think about and discuss. Do you think this form of censorship, like a digital censorship, has that affected you in a personal way as in your professional life as a poet, as a writer? Have you had to face the consequences of this digital censorship?
Yeah. But before I answer the question, I actually wanted to ask, take on something else and discuss that with you, Zen, because I just saw your bio. There's an MFA abroad. And part of what I was trying to do with my second novel, or my third novel actually, was try to show there's another type of censorship that operates very quietly, very silently, especially for people of color in the global north, which is that we're only allowed to say certain stories, right? So, you live in Morocco, and this character I was writing about was a Tunisian filmmaker, and he was like, if you're a Tunisian filmmaker in London, like your options are like, what can you actually write about? And there's a certain story that is requested of you. And if I'm a South Asian, Indian, Tamil woman, and there's a certain story that I never thought about the West because I grew up here for 25 years of my life in India, and then I returned after another 10 years abroad. So I never was conditioned to think about the Western gaze. I had never gone to university abroad or anything abroad. So I've spent all my life here. This was my only audience. This is the only place I was working to from, writing in. But then I go abroad and I realize that these things which are very burning issues for me, like, domestic violence, caste atrocity, because I'm still sitting here and it's a country of 1.2 billion people. So these are big for me. But then I realized that they actually fit into a very beautiful box that they have made for you, because these are some of the stories they desperately want to hear. They don't want you to talk about their foreign policy. They don't want you to talk about larger structural issues. They don't want you to talk about, oh, why are you talking about, let's say, radicalization of this? But this is so, and I felt, oh, this is a censorship. I didn't know I had walked into their bait. And I actually I really felt that way because, like, you're here, and did you feel that with your work, that you're allowed to say some stories and not allowed, and it's never explicit. It's never explicit. And the
No,
character that I
it's
wrote, yeah, like Karim was saying, like, he wants to piss off his professors, so he says, "Oh, can I write about the camel in Arab cinema?" He absolutely wants to take the piss. So he's like, he comes up with a thesis like that. And I really thought, so I want to hear your thoughts on that. Like, isn't that a censorship as well?
yeah, no, I've never thought about that as censorship, but it absolutely is. I think my experience with the MFA was very strange. It was very, very strange. I was the only brown person in a room of just white women, actually. It was like 12 white women and me. And as an MFA goes,
It
what you have to do
was not a
is
bad
you
time.
I don't know what it was. But it was a time. And it was because with an MFA program, what you have to do is from the first day, you bring your work to class and we're like, can you read this and tell me how to make this thing better? And the first thing you have to do as a reader of work, I do a lot of editing, so that's something I think about a lot, is the first thing you have to do is understand what the writer is trying to do. You don't just impose your standards or your own thinking or your own baggage onto someone's work and then analyze it. So from the very first day, I started getting questions or comments along the lines of, "Oh, but people aren't like that." I was like, "What do you?" About just very normal things. Like there was this scene in a story I wrote where a guy walked past like there was a political killing or something, and the protagonist just kind of walked past and he didn't look because he's like, this is normal, I've seen this before. He just did like glanced at this thing and he continued walking. And everyone was like, oh, that's impossible, that can't happen. I was like, what do you mean? I've seen it and I've done it also. So And so that's kind of a very minor thing, but when I was kind of pitching my book to agents, there was a lot of it in a very veiled way, it was never explicit. There was a request for more strife, there was a request for more struggle, there was a request for more like why isn't your character responding to this a specific understanding of people from your part of the world. And it really did make me feel like I couldn't publish a novel about someone, I don't know, spending their day like a Mrs. Dalloway. One of my favorite books. Like I couldn't write a
Mm,
Mrs. Dalloway where someone just wakes up one day
I
and
love
is
it.
preparing for a party for the rest of their day. Like no one's gonna publish that Pakistani story of a man who wakes up and does nothing, just walks around, does nothing, goes back. No one dies, nothing bad happens, no power cuts, no disease, no strife, no one, there's you feel like it is impossible to do. And you're absolutely right. Like that was something that started from the MFA program, where from day one I was constantly being like, okay, so if you don't understand who this character is, or if you don't understand what I'm trying to say, even though I do, and I know for sure that people who understand my part of the world do, what should I write? And that's a horrible place to be for someone who's trying to express themselves, because if you are already thinking about what someone else wants, for me at least, I it narrows down the possibilities of what you can be and what you can write by a millionfold. And I think it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy too. It's like that,
Prophecy, yeah.
yeah, because I want to write stories that don't exist, but in order to be accepted, I have to write stories that people want to publish. And the stories that people want to publish are stories that already exist because it's part of the
Yeah,
imagination,
it's
the Western
established.
imagination. Yeah, so you can't do much. And I think, yeah, absolutely, that is a form of censorship, and a pretty horrible one, because that means that the only stories from our part of the world that are accessible to people are stories that kind of keep pandering to specific stereotypes, keep pandering to specific ways of thinking, keep pandering to, yeah, or just keep reproducing the same characters and the same narratives over and over and over again. Like you have to write about struggle and strife, or no one will care, or you have to write about a specific, yeah, image
Family,
of the world.
generational. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
and I think that, is and coming from that, I think that part of what I was trying to, for us to talk through and think through was the idea that, we are censored even before we say a word, or there is only a certain story that's expected of us. And especially when the West becomes the medium through which all of this is, is either curated or circulated or produced. I think it really changes so many equations, because you're looking at your country and where you're writing to, and then suddenly there's all of this, like, oh, why is there this big scene around this book? Like, for me it was everything. um I was writing in a context where I thought it was literature, and they were reading it in a context where they were reading it as self-help. So it was all of these things that was going on with me. But the reason I felt this also ties up, this publishing also ties up to shadow banning and all other aspects of it, is that two things are happening.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I think there are broadly two of these ideas that I want to handle. The first is that when it comes to the online space, and the idea of digital censorship, and what we are handling is that a lot of writers who also happen to have explicit political opinions, you're in a stage where you cannot stay in your country and produce the work that you do, because either your account will be taken down, or you will face cases for this, or like they will have content restrictions. All of this keeps happening on one hand. And therefore it becomes so difficult to, you forget producing the work, so difficult to have an opinion and be in the public eye. And therefore some way, the so-called liberal West gives you a platform to have this online existence, but that comes at a complete expense of the kind of work that you're allowed to produce, or the kind of work that they want to consume out of you. So you can be this activist, but then you have to write the stories that they want you to write. And I think there's a dichotomy there. But then coming back to this question also of the publishing industry and how I felt that they are, like you talk about code, and like they also are right now, Zain made this point about influencers. I think, and people who spend 80% of their time online, I think right now publishing is moving towards a model where it's do not even look at who is writing. They're looking at people with the biggest amount of Instagram following. And then they're like, oh, you have 250K followers, you have 1 million followers, let's do a book deal. Because if I do a book deal with you, it's so easy it's going to be so easy for me to push 10,000 copies as opposed to a real writer. So I think it's all of these multiple ways in which algorithms, follower counts, and what I think is this very the vulgar idea of the metric has replaced the idea of, literature as something that is not quantifiable. And how do you deal with it, Zen? And what do you tell your young students?
I mean, the publishers have to make money, right? I think that's what the
Yeah.
the problem is that readership. I mean, I don't know. I've read many different studies and articles about that say, oh, people are reading more than ever, and other articles that say, oh, people have completely stopped reading. Or there's one article that says the novel is dead, and another that says, oh, the novel's booming.
Oh
Who
no, where
knows?
are all the white men novelists? That's the biggest thing they've been crying about.
Where did they
They're
go?
Where did the white men go? Young white men go.
Yeah, where did they go? No, so I think with my students, and again, this is coming both from experience in class in Pakistan and in Morocco, because they're very similar contexts in terms of a country that was colonized and is now starting to realize, oh, that maybe that wasn't that great to begin with. Maybe the railways weren't worth what has happened to multiple generations of our people over the last few years. The one thing I always have to deal with, the one question I always have to deal with, is that the first time any student in my class writes a story, because they don't have a prompt, I just tell them to write whatever story they want to write as like a first submission. And inevitably, it will be a story about someone in America. 90% of the time, it'll be a story about someone based in New York, someone going to a bar which they've never been to, someone staying in an apartment that they've never seen. So it's this really unconscious reproduction of things that they see on TV. It's things that they see online. It's things that they have been taught to believe and told to believe are better than what they have. So the first question I deal with when I tell them, why are you writing this? Write about something for yourself. I was like, but professor, who will read this? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, professor, I'm from this small place in Casablanca. Who wants to read about that? No one wants to read about that. Everyone knows America. Everyone knows this place. Everyone knows New York. I want to write a story that's based there so that more people read it. And then I'm like, it's okay. You're right. That's probably what will get published. But the idea is for me as an instructor of creative writing, um, is to get them to tell their stories. So that conversation begins a struggle that lasts one semester and hopefully a few more semesters if they keep taking classes with me, of trying to convince them that their idea of what makes a good story or their idea of what makes a readable story is actually something that they've gotten from these years of neo-colonial influence. It's not something that exists, like it's not a standard that exists somewhere in the ether. It's not something that is true. It's just something that we've been taught to believe, and that's been reinforced in us again and again and again. Again, another form of censorship, like this idea that this is true and this is good and this is beautiful, and everything else is irrelevant or everything else is immaterial. So that is the struggle. And I think it's just constantly forcing them to look within rather than without, constantly forcing them to write from their lives or adapt from their lives or adapt from lives of people they know versus things they see on Netflix. I think that's the only way to do it. And now with this AI monstrosity in the classroom, it's even more difficult because if you and we did this experiment in class the other day where I was like, okay, like you have to. They had to write a story about something, and they were like, "Oh, can we brainstorm using AI?" I was like, "Guys, use your brains." But then eventually, I was like, "Fine, see what happens. Let's do it. Let you brainstorm your topics of a Moroccan story using AI and see what happens." And oh my God, it was the same story. Everything was based in Marrakesh, and people were drinking tea, and there were camels, and every story it suggested was the story of someone being subjected to it's tourists or something. I don't know. The things that it produced were again the same self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing of the same story keeps being parroted over and over and over again. So they're like, oh, professor, if we write about Morocco, do we write about these two people drinking tea in a cafe in Marrakesh at the Journal Fana, which is the big square, and watching these snake charmers and a monkey dancing people? And I was like, yeah, that's what you're gonna get if you ask AI about what stories you want to tell. So yeah, it's a constant struggle, and this colonial hangover that these, at least Pakistan and Morocco, have is I think one of the strongest forms of censorship that yeah, a weird form of censorship, one of the strongest forms of censorship that we've subjected ourselves to. And yeah, I I I think is it different with poetry? Have you found it to be more liberating in terms of trying to kind of break these chains, as it were, to be slightly dramatic?
I don't know. I don't know, Zain. Before we go to poetry, I actually wanted to respond to what you said, and I think that this hangover in which you know, uh, completely broke down in this very simple format for everyone to understand, like how we are getting into this. People say MFA is a formulaic, but then it's not just the idea of the formulaic writing, but also how it has repercussions around the world and around, like, I read this thing about, oh, what happens to the nonfiction essay and why is the I so important there, or the idea of the individual's experience so much important over the collective. And these are things people have gone through, and possibly even the white introspection has happened, or the American introspection has happened, but they never quite introspected the carry over effects of that into the neocolonial parts of the world, and which you really laid a finger on, and what kind of things they make you write about your own cultures. And I think that's really very splendid, but also something that makes me want to say that it's writing is one type of trap where this is happening. But I also find that I was trying to, over the last few years, I was writing a novel, and I wanted to write about the Indian digital public sphere, and especially the male voices there, but also the masculinity there, the kind of abuse that women were being forced to get there, and how it was colluding with the far right. And one of the things I understood was that there is this very lazy. It's not just lazy. It's because the West often gets to designate words, like they get to designate what's called a genocide. It's not a genocide until they say it's a genocide, or until it happens to white people. It's not fascism until they get to call it fascism, or it happens to white people. Like, there are all these terms. And I think the same thing happened with the word incel. And then they came up with this idea of the incel, but then you're working and you're trying to read and understand what's happening in India. But the Indian incel is not somebody who is not getting sex. And like, that can't be the borderline definition. And then you look at the Indian manosphere and you look at how it's operating. It's a very corporate model. it's a very top down, very hierarchical corporate model who are working with basic toolkits. They are so organized, and there's a complete salary, there's payrolls, people getting bonuses, and there's like every single thing. And you're like, you cannot compare the Western incel, who are isolated individuals, and use that here. Like, there's an entirely different ecosystem. And until we start naming these things, and until we start writing that, like, we're never going to stop either A, like expressing what is our reality, but also B, like actually sounding the alarm bell for them, because you have come up with this very safe idea of an incel and whatever XYZ it is, but it could be organized to capture complete elections. Innocence could be organized to do X and Y and Z, and you're like, you don't understand how much these algorithms and this kind of what you call micro targeting and feeding at the lowest common denominator of people's fears in order to capture elections. And like, oh, we are seeing that here. And like, maybe you have to look a little at what is happening and then see like how it's going to get projected on your democracies and stuff like that, because at this point we are having fascist democracies. And how is that possible? Because elections are being captured, and elections are being captured because of how? Because everyone's hacked the algorithm. The right wing knows how to do, a set of propaganda that's going to make them win elections with, whatever you call post-truth, or, whatever those words are. But so I'm so fascinated because, it's something that you are able to see so up close in fiction in its almost skeletal form. But then you go elsewhere, and the thing is, the more things become prestigious, like let's say political thought is prestigious, philosophy is prestigious, the less we are allowed to theorize it for ourselves.
Of
And
course.
I think it's possibly the same with technology as well, and the same with literary theory. And I think there is an enormous frustration that builds up because we only become a certain type of producer of literature as opposed to a critique or anything else. These are like viabilities that don't exist. In terms of poetry, I don't know what to say because a lot of the time, I once got into this entire loop. I don't want to spend too much time, where somebody made a university syllabus which hallucinated the title of a poem that I did not write. And then students were asking me for the copy of the poem, and I said, I haven't written any poem like this. I know my titles, I have very provocative titles. I never written a poem like that. So students went and asked ChatGPT, tell us what's in the poem. And ChatGPT hallucinated a poem according to whichever student was asking. And then somebody decided that because it's on a university syllabus, they were going to do YouTube videos explaining this poem that I had not written. So there was hallucinated material, hallucinating more material. And then it started going online. And I had to give all these copyright and take down notices to YouTube saying, well, this is my name. I've never written a poem like that. These lines do not exist. So yeah, I think with poetry, it's another, because it's so small, it's like 100 words, 200 words at a time. And it's not, the same volume of a novel. It becomes so much easy to, get caught in all of this crossfire, I think, of AI and hallucination. So yeah, fake codes.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. Coming back to what you were talking about with these things that we've made prestigious. I was just thinking about literary theory, right? Because when South Asian academics talk about literary theory, and this is again just in my experience, we talk about the post-colonial and we talk about the decolonial. There's no language that we have, no established language that we have to talk about literary theory from the ground up. It's always something that responds to colonial, something that is after the colonial, something that is against the colonial. And that's the one of the things I felt in the MFA program too, is that you're kind of not I you're not supposed to or not allowed to write from a place that is not responding to the established paradigm. And the established paradigm for us is, thank you very much, the colony, right? It's the fact that we were at some point a colony of something, and now everything we write has to somehow respond to it, and everything we everything we write, everything we think somehow has to either go against it or respond to it. And that it is always there. And that is not something that they have to deal with I mean, I went through a phase of reading these stories from American writers mostly during my MFA program because I lived right across from an old bookstore and they were very cheap. And the number of stories that I read that were, oh, this guy went to a store and he thought about his life and he came back, or and I was like, why is he not pushing against the established paradigm of what it means to be something or the other? Like because there's nothing to push against, and that's not what's being published. So no, it's really interesting and it's really crazy how difficult it is to get out of this. It's really difficult to and to teach someone to get out of this gauge-ish thing that we've constructed for ourselves. Yeah, um, I find it very, very confusing, and I find it very also in some ways, I suppose if you look at it with a little more hope, it's also something that gives me some motivation to write or motivation to teach people how to write those things. But there's always this thing in the back of my head. I was like, yeah, no one's going to publish that, but you should write it. And that's also why I think that the digital sphere is both a bad thing and a good thing because you can put out pretty much whatever you want for unless it gets shadow banned or whatever. But I think this access that this new world has given people and creators to just, they don't have to go through the gatekeepers of publishing anymore. I'm sure you've experienced Substack. I'm not on it, but I've heard people talk about Substack. People are putting up entire novels on Substack. I was like, great, you do that.
No, no, I have planned not to give away so much for free. Like, the idea, I think a Substack is a lot of writing time. And it is a lot of writing time. And I'm like, and also generally tend to think that all of writing, 9/10 of writing is thinking. So if I
Mhm.
have to write something, I have to have a lot of thought going into it, which is why, I don't write too many op-eds. I don't write too many essays. I only write when I have something to say. I have a book out every 3-4 years because I'm working on them, and I don't want to do that. Like, if I have to say something short and pithy, I'm going to go on Twitter and say my shit and get into trouble. I'm not going to write an entire essay on Substack for you to read for free. And I think that somehow Substack has tried to tell people, oh, if publishing is not working, you can go here. But I really feel the pitfalls are like the big names, let's say Salman Rushdie or whoever, are going to get the subscribers, the base, and the kind of reception that they were always getting. But a lot of other people are basically going to be producing work for free, absolutely free. And anything that they make, maybe their friends are paying, but you're going to be making $100 to $200 a year, and it's going to amount to nothing. It's going to amount to very little. So yeah, I refuse to write for free because that's another way to saying, there's no gatekeeping. But that also means that their outlets will only be open to them. Like I don't know. I have not got on the Substack train. I don't see myself getting on it. Uh, so and I yeah. So and the problem with this kind of generation of activity again, I think is like it's we used to have blogs, right? Like Blogspot or Blogger or WordPress. I think I used to be on WordPress. So the thing at least then was that you could blog when you wanted to. It was not a quick, but I think with Substack there's a certain thing you have to write notes, that you have to write and engage with your followers at a certain rate. And all of that also means that people are eventually going to look for shortcuts. There's going to be AI writing, or it's going to, and that kind of being prolific is also something the algorithm wants to push towards you towards. But it's not necessary because and then you also see, oh, I wrote an entire Substack about it and somebody made a story out of it in this magazine or that magazine. There's also the idea of like who gets the big name credit and all of that. So for me, it's a very murky territory. I've never gone there, so I wouldn't quite know how to answer that. But yeah.
No, I wouldn't either because I don't read or have been on Substack. It's just something that I've seen my students put stuff on, and I think the idea for them is that it's a platform that exists where they and it's also it's a double-edged sword in another way where I don't believe in sharing your work till you at least you are somewhat happy with it or till you've edited it 100,000 times at least, and then put it out in the world. So there's a lot of really bad writing on there too. I don't know what bad writing is. That's not the right word, but there's a lot of very, as you said, lazy writing. There's a lot of just to keep up
Hasty
with
writing. Yeah.
hasty writing, just to keep up with a perceived demand or the perceived need of the algorithm to kind of keep getting stuff from you. Because if you stop uploading, if you stop writing, if you stop producing, if you stop making videos, if you stop, creating, then you are forgotten. And I think that's another bad thing that Substack is encouraging, which is you have to keep producing, you have to keep you have to keep writing, you have to keep producing, otherwise you'll be forgotten or someone else will get the money, whatever the money is. And I think it produces lazy, hasty writing that maybe isn't worth much. But then the question remains, where do they go? Where does someone produces who has produced something that they feel is of worth, uh, if they go to your traditional publishers, they will probably not make it. I think there's a higher chance that what they want to write or what they want to say won't make it to a bookshelf anytime soon. Where do we go to escape the this particular form of censorship or this particular form of restriction, where no one wants to buy the story that you want to tell? I mean, we're speaking from a little from a lucky place. I feel I am speaking from a lucky place is that I was able to get into a program that had professors that were very well established in the publishing world. They were able to get me an agent. Who was able to get me an editor, who was able to get a book of mine out. Like that's a one in a million thing. I feel, and that's not something that everyone can do. So what do people do? How do people get out of this kind of situation where the stories they want to tell, no one wants to buy, or they don't have access to someone who will buy these stories and
Yeah,
tell those stories?
but Zain, I think the difference is between, what you call literature and content. A lot of people want only to create content, like, you know what I mean? Like, so the fact is, if and they wouldn't call themselves, writer in the same way that you and I would call ourselves a writer. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not privileging one over the other. They're all the same in some way, trying to make meaning in the world and or make meaning of the world. And to me, I do not believe in being snobbish, but I definitely think that it's not just Substack. For instance, Instagram also runs on that algorithm that you have to post daily, that you have to do this and you have to do that, and therefore that kind of content uh, squeezes you in a certain different direction, as opposed to writing a book does, or writing a collection of poetry does, or working on a novel over years does, or working on short stories does. And I think that it's very difficult. I mean, and I want you to like tell me about what's your experience. Like, one of my experience was being asked to get away from Twitter because they said everyone hates you on Twitter and you're not going to sell books on Twitter. Even if there's engagement, it doesn't matter. Even if you have 200,000 followers, it doesn't matter. We want to sell books. Um, and it's not about what position you occupy. So, like, get off Twitter, get into Instagram, and get these many followers. And then people were like, "Oh, we're going to send you samples of, very good Instagram pages that we want you to do." And I at the beginning, I'm like, I'm not an Instagram person myself, um, and in my day job, I do political communication. So I literally run the Twitter handles of politicians, and then I'm like, so I know how it works. And I can't put myself through that. Like, especially when you know how the system works and how virality works and how timing works and how keywords work and how, your message has to do all of this and not do any of that. So when you know it's you don't want to be a part of it. So like, what do I do on Insta? And then they're sending me this, and I'm scrolling through, and it's all these lattes and like matchas, and then this book shows. So it's like a coffee meets bookstore feed, and that's the aesthetic they want out of you. And I'm like, I can't curate myself. Like it would be so fake to be that, but also it would. I'm an intensely private person. Like, how do I start doing all of this? Like, and like, for instance, Sabine knows that my son was in emergency 2 days ago, but I would never put that out in, like, Instagram, because it would get engagement, it would get followers, but that's my life. Like, it's not something for me to perform for you. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm like, no, I can't do this Insta life. But there is really, really, really that expectation. And especially, I think what's the most interesting part of the literary production process for me, single most funny thing or crazy thing, is the unboxing video. And nothing makes me more pissed off than the unboxing video, because you are not getting that big a box from, I don't know, maybe if Marks and Spencer is sending you lingerie, but really light, right? So if you're getting a big box, it's going to be 100% your book. So don't act fucking surprised. They're all like, "Ooh, let's see what it is." And then you'll have to hold a copy of your book. No, but you approved the cover. You don't have to make any of this goo goo gaga noises about the cover, that you approved yourself. Like, you worked on this specific, especially with me, I work on every specific Pantone font. I'm like, I want it in this one. I can't gush over something I worked on, but you really have to do all of that. And I'm like, no, no, like, I think I'm too skeptical, and I'm like a bit of a tight ass about it. So I just can't do it. But have you been asked to cultivate as Instagram persona to sell your books?
No, no one's asked me.
Oh
No one's
no.
bothered. But no, I've never been on Twitter either. I think the only tweet I ever tweeted, are they still called tweets? I'm not even sure if they're still
No,
whatever
they're
they're
too cold
called.
to accept.
Okay, great. Was that, oh, now I'm
We
now on
can't
Twitter,
call them
and that was the
exes,
only
because
thing.
then I'd be like, how many exes do you do in a day?
Yep. Yep. No, I think that would be horrible. No, but I completely agree with what you're saying. It's a whole different world, because I think Instagram is for books. The word bookstagrammer is now a thing. Like, you have
Instagram, yeah, yeah, yeah,
people,
yeah.
yeah, it's a marketing thing. And I think it's just companies pushing their marketing budget, getting rid of their marketing budget, and
Mm.
trying to get authors to do their marketing for them, for themselves. And I really like what you were saying. Like, they kind of want you to
How did
love
you not do an
your
unboxing video? You never got to do
yours.
an unboxing video?
Funny story. I couldn't actually get a box delivered because the book was published in India, and at that point, I mean, India and Pakistan were not trading boxes, so I never got a box. So there was no unboxing video. I just got a book in the mail about 6 months later. So I wasn't. Oh yeah, I didn't have to, which is great.
You
But I
couldn't
see them all
unbox
the
a
time.
bag. Okay.
Yeah, didn't have to do that. But no, it's yeah. The, it's what you were talking about with literature and content, because I feel a lot of the marketing around books these days, even if they're high literary books, is content marketing, is influencer marketing, is this kind of marketing that reduces the book to a topic to talk about rather than a book to be read and savored and enjoyed and read, just experienced as literature. I think just this push towards creating content around books, they might help sell the book, but I think it reduces books to a one sentence long talking point. And that is why books that have, really radical or really, what's the word, fancy taglines are the ones that really get picked up, and are the ones that really get a lot of traction on the internet. Like, there was this one, um a story went viral a few years ago called Cat Person by it was
Yes.
published in the New Yorker, and there was like so much buzz around that story, and I was like, oh, interesting. But everyone was talking about, oh, it's about a thing that's very, very relevant to today's day and age. So yeah, I think it privileges this push towards Instagram. It privileges books are that can be packaged as shocking, or can be packaged as I think Sabine had this in the document she showed, like something that rage baits people, or something that makes people angry, or something that makes people really happy. So yeah, it's a very strange world. I haven't been asked to do it myself, mostly because I haven't written
Not
anything
yet.
in
Not yet.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, once I write something, once I actually get down to writing something again, I think that will happen. But yeah, it's pretty strange. Yeah. How do you find books to read?
Oh, like right now, I'm judging a competition on translated writing. So I have got 45 books to read. So, so
Great.
it's not, I always don't get to choose the books, but I think since I became a mother, it was quite a while back, but then I take my children to bookstores. So they are very disappointed with me as the writer because I'm not Dave Pilkey, who wrote The Dog Man. So like, Amma, you're a writer, but you're not picky. So it's like, but then I go to bookstores with them, so I do pick up what I like. I also uh, I have a lot of friends who write books, so it's a lot. I constantly have a reading list. I also think if I have to write something, I research it endlessly because I think I'm still addicted to being that PhD student and that researcher, and uh, that tendency to, let's say, we have to read 1,000 pages in a week has never gone away. So it's really like haunting me. But the only thing is that I'm slightly happy for at the moment is, for instance, when I write fiction, I don't read fiction because even subconsciously, I don't want to sound like anyone else. I really want to craft what I'm doing. So we were talking about rage bait, like the last book that I wrote. It's a very rage bait title. It's called Field Work as a Sex Object. And every chapter also has a title which is like the equivalent of a YouTube thumbnail, or the equivalent of what's a clickbait or a rage bait. So for me to try to mimic the internet, to try to mimic that experience of the reel or the doom scroll in a book of fiction, I was like, no, I'm not reading anything else. I'm just gonna work on this. So every time I finish writing a book, I'm the happiest person because I cannot write immediately. So I just spend years reading. So I'm actually catching up a lot, lots of books. Like I think I got Uprising by Tanima Nam. I have got a couple of other books lying. I think I've got Ishani Doshi's latest. I've got Avni Doshi's latest book. So, and I've got Rahul Pandita's Friends in Good Houses. So, yeah, suddenly I have time to catch up on all the reading that I have secluded or protected myself from. So, yeah.
Amazing. That's a really interesting way to think about, because I used to think that I had to be reading while I was writing, but now that I am trying to write again, I find that reading fiction isn't helping, but watching really disturbing true crime documentaries is really helping me.
Yes.
Uh,
No, no, no. Yeah, Netflix is good. Every other art form is good. Taking yourself to a museum is good. Looking at artwork is good. Doing pottery is good. And I do everything except reading other people's fiction.
Excellent
It's
point.
really like a mind's game. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sabine, you've been
So
taking notes while we've been talking.
yeah, you haven't talked anything, Sabine. We feel
Yeah.
bad.
No, no, no. I enjoyed listening to both of you. It was really, really enlightening. And the one question that came to my mind, you were talking about, content, how content is being flooded, not just on Substack, but, if somebody is a YouTube creator, a content creator, they have to, be on their toes all the time and create something or the other. So, the more content created, does that mean, that that's like an agenda to dilute voice? Because you're always looking, see, like for instance, Ananke, we publish when we think there is material to publish, which is why we have a niche, following. It's not like a million, a billion, whatever followers. So, do you think voice gets diluted? And is there an agenda behind? Because when it comes to talking about tech and algorithms, you can customize algorithms any way you want, but the big tech isn't doing that. Does it make sense?
Sabine,
I
I can
mean,
I can answer this. Not sorry, Zain, go ahead. No,
no, no,
Zain,
no,
go
go
ahead.
for it.
I'll come back. No,
No, I
I
was
think
just gonna
I
say,
can answer this. Go ahead, please.
now I'm muting myself. Go.
No. I can't answer this from the literature or writing point of view, but definitely from politics. So what happens is that in politics, there's some controversy that's happening, and you hope to God there's a distraction. You hope to God there's a distraction because you know that algorithmically people are not going to. So, for instance, then there's like a film star has an affair, or somebody's spotted with somebody else, or like some crazy thing happens. Two people are getting into a cat fight, whatever it is, you really, really are waiting for that moment so that the heat is taken on from you. So maybe they don't serve this kind of content generation, doesn't serve a primary purpose in itself, but it can serve a very good, I don't know, like a escape hatch for something that's simmering. So you're always like, and distractions are very helpful. Like, so for instance, in politics, like, big things are happening and there's a lot of anti-incumbency. Then we get into fight with the neighbor. Then everybody's thinking about what's happening in your, fight with the neighbor as opposed to what's happening here. So these kind of distractions that are, both on the global scale, but also on regional, local issues. And then, so definitely they help that, like, and I think at least in political messaging, 100% of the time, that some influencer or some viral, stupid, trending shit is going to divert people's attention. And you can always almost bet on that. And if your betting on that doesn't help, you can create it. You generate something. You generate some shit somewhere, and or you wait for some of the shit to blow up. So it's I think that's part of how, like, for instance, a lot of politicians would post dog pictures or cat pictures, or like things like you these things that come to your rescue when your image takes a hit. So it's multiple strands of these things that are happening at once. So this is my reading of the
So,
situation on
do you think that is another kind of if you look at it from a different angle, this is another kind of censorship, a nuanced way. You have the Met Gala and you have the genocide.
I mean, it's a
no
great
having another.
distraction, as Meena was saying.
Mhm.
Sorry. No, no, I was just going to say
No, nothing,
it
nothing,
is,
nothing.
they
Yeah.
are great distractions. As Meena said, I haven't thought about it that way, but yeah, I think it's censorship in the way that it stops you from, as sorry, Sabine, as you were saying, it dilutes most of the time smarter voices or voices that should be heard over random voices. Because a lot of the time the content that gets generated is extremely random content by extremely unqualified people that should not be talking about certain things. So yeah, I think that that's absolutely true. And having these, as you said, having one beautiful, shiny thing happening at the same time as an ugly, dark, horrible thing, obviously, I think some people will be distracted. Most people will be distracted, I think, by the shiny thing. So no, I agree. The distractions help powerful people keep doing things that powerful people want to keep doing. And yeah, I think it pulls them out of, as Meena was saying, some difficult situations. Yeah, if a dog picture can distract a whole country from, I don't know, a war that's happening next door, then why wouldn't it be used, or why wouldn't it be helpful for people in power.
True, true. So any last words from the two of you?
No, I want to ask you, Sabine,
Yeah.
how do you keep it going in this digital, space of crying for attention? Like, how do you do it year after year? Like, you have to tell us.
Oh, Meena, this is what gets me, it keeps me sane. Otherwise, you know, uh, we go into a very dark space or dark place.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to Annie Zeddy a few days ago, and, I was talking about this exhaustion and, witnessing from a distance. Yes, where I'm talking from a place of privilege, but there is this exhaustion. And she said, this is what all of us are feeling right now. But talking to all of you and coming together, this is what keeps me going. Last year, I was so severely ill. I was hospitalized for 3 months, but I had my laptop and my books with me, literally in the hospital. I asked my family to bring it, bring those things, and that's what kept me going. And I think having these sorts of conversations, I hope these are not distractions, but narratives where some kind of impact can take place. That's me hoping, and this is the reason we do what we do.
Not a distraction. This is like a
Mm-hmm.
thoughtfully curated list of things and people, things that need to be spoken about, and people that are probably good at talking about those things. So no, I think this is, yeah, this is what you need more of rather than less of. Thoughtful conversations about topics that we should be talking about, done in a very, yeah, curated fashion and not just random, not a random distraction. So I think that's you're doing what you set out to do. That's wonderful.
Thanks to all of you, actually.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Sabine, and thank
asking
you,
us to be a
Zain.
part.
Thank you
Thank
so
you, Meena.
much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you. Just jotted down one thing to end this conversation with, which is what Meena said about the allure of internet. We thought we could be anything, but the backlash is not just the surveillance part, but the idea of the sense of self being erased. So very pertinent thought. Thank you so much, both of you, for this amazing conversation. I'm so glad and so honored to have you both with me. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sabine.
Sabine.
Thank you, Zain.
Thank you.